So here we are, folks. The Global Travel Channel podcast show is back, and I've got a special guest for you all today. He's a great young man, and we're going to hear about his amazing journey. Atdhe, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast.
Mark, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Now, I'm going to start off with the very obvious question. Are you happy?
Yes, I am very happy. I'm happy to be here, Mark.
Well, I'm glad that you came because I always get friends of mine dropping me notes on social media saying, "Hey, you got to chat to this guy. He'd be really great for your show. He's doing something really, really cool," and you are doing something very, very cool. But before we get on to that, we're going to talk about travel a little bit in your life, and let's start off by getting to know exactly where you are today in the world. Whereabouts are you talking to us from?
So right now I'm in Connecticut in the East Coast of the United States.
Fantastic. That's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, I love it here. A lot of lush greenery. I grew up here in the East Coast between New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. So I love this place. There's no place like home, truly.
So, because we are a travel show, it might be a good idea for you to spend just a couple of minutes telling people why should they come to Connecticut? Why should they come to that part of the world?
Oh, that's a great question. Uh, I could say this with full confidence, Mark. The best pizza, coffee, or bagels you will ever have in the entire world, the world, will be found on the East Coast of the United States, specifically the tri-state area. Now, why do I say that? I'm sure we have Italians listening and they say, "Oh, my pizza is from Sicily. This is the best." Look, the Sicilians that came from Sicily in the early 20s to America, to the East Coast, and started creating their own, like started bringing the recipes from home, they kept it. So you've got true 1920s Sicily
Ah,
pizza here, whereas Sicily has continued to grow. So yeah.
well, I tell you what, I've got a mate, Greg Schwem, who's going to be listening to the show from Chicago today, and he came on my show a few weeks ago, and he was telling me that Chicago has the best pizzas in the world. So,
I'm sure even Greg would admit that there's nothing like a nice New York style pizza. There's nothing like it. Look, Chicago has its own benefit, but when you want to talk about tradition, you want to talk about true taste, go no further than East Coast style pizza.
okay, cool. So, what about activities? What do people come to Connecticut to do? What's there to see and do around that place?
That's a great question. Connecticut's a pretty small state. So nothing is coming to mind in terms of activities. There are a lot of beautiful hikes. It's a very suburban area. Um, it's very close to New York, so you have a lot of people that work in the city. Like I worked in New York City for a few years and commuted from Connecticut. So a lot of people that you see working in New York live in the outskirts of Connecticut.
A lot of people do that commute, and there's been a lot of famous movies made where that scene on the train going from Connecticut into New York City is quite
Of course,
prevalent. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, exactly. Good. Now, tell us. On the show, I always allow my guests to dedicate their show to someone special in their life. So, who would you like to dedicate your episode to today?
Wow, that's a great question, Mark. Um, you know, I'll have to say, I'll have to give it to my parents for this one. Uh, I was always very determined to pursue this dream of filmmaking. They're always very supportive, but I knew that I wanted to make it happen on my own. And they were always that driving force behind me that, they believed in me, never doubted me. Um, so just very appreciative of them. I know that they are always they're my bedrock. So I really love and appreciate my mom and dad.
That's beautiful. And what are their names?
My dad's name is Ramazan, and
Ramazan,
my mom's name is Embria.
Imbria, and Ramazan. I'm sure they're
Yeah.
going to be watching this at some stage, and that's a beautiful dedication for you to give to them. Now, tell us what got you into the film thing in terms of what was the inspiration behind wanting to be a filmmaker?
Um, it happened at such a young age that it's kind of blurry. But you think about how Quincy Jones, this like big time producer, talks about his experience when he first touched the piano. He talks about how he felt it in his bones. He knew that that's what he needed to do. I remember touching a camera for the first time and knowing. I remember crying, seeing the first thing I recorded, just like as a little 7 year old. I just knew, Mark, that it was something that I was just born to do. I needed to do, and that doesn't mean I was born Stanley Kubrick. That's far from the truth. So it was a lot of hardship. You know, it's really hard being in the arts because a lot of us have that passion,
Mm.
but don't have the skills to satisfy our taste. So there's always that disparity until you finally get to that area where your kind of skills are matching your taste. But it's it's been a lot of hard work, and it's that feeling I had when I was a kid that inspired me to pick up the camera in the first place that's kept me going throughout.
Do you remember the first thing you ever shot on a camera?
Absolutely. It was with my parents' old VHS camera, shot on tape, and I must have messed up the zoom function of the camera because, and I still have that footage. It's just color. It's completely zoomed in, just colors back and forth. And I remember looking at it, hooking it up to my TV, playing it back, and crying,
Mm.
not knowing why I felt these emotions, but crying as I watched what I had shot.
That's beautiful. Were you running around school as a young guy telling everybody you're going to be a filmmaking star? Was that the dream?
Yeah, I think if you were to ask any of my friends in high school, they knew I was going to do something along these lines. And it's not because I was running around screaming it, but it was because I couldn't hang out because I had to make my movie. I couldn't go out that weekend because I was taking the train into the city as a 13-year-old to audition for something. So it showed in my dedication to accomplishing my goals, not in my talking. I didn't talk much.
Mm. We're going to talk a lot about your project, your special project you're doing at the moment. But before we get there, I just thought we'd find out a little bit more about your travel experience because you're a man
Yes,
that loves to travel. You're a guy that's been to many, many different places. Do you remember your first overseas travel experience?
absolutely. I being Albanian is a huge part of my background, and that comes from my family. They wanted to make sure that I didn't forget my culture, I didn't forget my language, where I come from. So as a young kid, I remember I did kindergarten there. I went from America to kindergarten with the intention of living there permanently,
Mm.
um, leaving America for good and going back to the homeland. Uh, and after a year, my parents started to have a change of heart, which I love my country, of course, but I'm glad that they had the change of heart. But I remember very vividly being in this foreign country with with completely different sort of system and way of doing things. So yeah, I was a very young kid.
Mm. What about after that? What about some of your earliest major travel experiences where you can remember them and you're engaging with people around the world? Where did you travel to first?
Probably my first trip because after that trip to Albania, we went back every summer. And actually, those are the vivid memories. I remember my experiences learning what it means to be in a foreign country, meaning there's acclimation to climate, there's acclimation to elevation, there's acclimation to the food. That's one people relate to the most. But if you travel to a city that's has high elevation, you're much more susceptible to getting colds, to getting sick, seasick, or like motion sickness or whatever. Um, so where I would travel to, I remember being sick a lot, and that exposed me to hospitals in a foreign country and how that operates.
Mm. Right.
Getting needles in my butt. I was like, whoa, what's happening here? I guess that's just how they did things. I guess it's faster to the bloodstream. I don't know, but and different sort of medication. I remember I broke my hand one time riding a moped. I was 13. I shouldn't have even been given a moped. Cracked my wrist, and do you think, did I go to a hospital and get a proper X-ray? Of course not.
Yeah.
I went to a local physician, I guess, and he had a wooden bucket in his backyard that he crushed with his foot, put the planks around my hand, kind of snapped my wrist back into place, put the planks around my hand, tied it up, and I was sent on my way.
I like the way you talk about things like elevation and those things. I've done over 150 of these shows on travel, and no one before has talked about getting in touch with those things through your senses. And I think that's such an important part of travel, is using all of your senses to connect with the surroundings that you're in. Did those first trips really give you an appetite to travel more, to see the world, to go to all sorts of different places?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I grew up and started to gain more freedoms, more personal freedoms to pursue my own traveling aspirations, I kind of jumped into the deep end of travel, which is where I made a lot of traveling mistakes. Um, as a kid, I had been traveling under supervision, and now as soon as I started to get some individual freedom, I was like, oh, I want to travel on my own. Let me go to this foreign country that with no preparation. Um, and you make a lot of mistakes and you learn a lot. I'm happy to talk about those as well. It's crazy.
Yeah, why not tell us? We want to know what mistakes did you make?
Yeah, most importantly, like a lot of people ask me, oh, how could I travel like you? How can I travel on a budget? This is what I've learned like the hard way. Before making any decision to travel, I feel like you must first answer the philosophical question of why do you want to travel? Are you traveling are you traveling to quote unquote find yourself? Are you traveling to have your spiritual awakening? If so, stop. Put put the phone down. Don't buy that ticket because this spiritual awakening thing that you're looking for is real and it is very, very difficult uh, to go through. A spiritual awakening is like it's like a crumbling of your ego. What you want to call it, ego death, you want to call it spiritual, whatever it is a crumbling of everything you know and believe in,
Hmm.
and you don't want to experience that in a place where the street signs are squiggly lines. You want to know your way back home because it could get hard out there. Uh, but if you've got that covered, you're like, I'm not traveling to have some sort of crazy experience. I want to experience the foods. I want to experience the culture. That's something completely different. But just have that conversation with yourself.
That's very, very cool. Was this due to kind of enlightenment that you went through yourself? Did you find that out the hard way?
Luckily, I was about to find it out the hard way, but I instead decided to have this awakening experience close to home, so to speak. And I was very, very grateful that I did.
Good on you. Now,
Yeah.
when you got out there and you started traveling around the world, what were some of the things that impacted you and, seeing other cultures for the first time and interacting with people? What commonalities did you find in people around the world?
It's a great question. So the first question, like what impacted me the most, was in order to truly experience a country you're traveling to, you have to go into the homes. You know, there's no better five-star meal than a home cooked meal. Your most valuable dish is not the five-star restaurant, it's a home cooked meal in the city that you're in. Because you'll get the food, you get the family experience, you learn so much about what it means to actually be in that country and going to a restaurant. Um, and the other thing is, for the most part, the people that are natives to the country enjoy tourists and they want to be proud of their country. So they will want to show you the best restaurant. They want to show you the best bars, the best hotels, the best city areas, and you kind of just have to. What I tell my guides, friends, people I meet is I want to see the city through your eyes. I want to know where you had your first kiss.
Hmm.
I want to
Hmm.
know what your favorite restaurant is. Where you go to with your friends. Those things is how you get a true taste of the country.
Are you always traveling with your camera and capturing these moments as you're describing them? Because a lot of people wouldn't go into the amount of detail that you're talking about in terms of being consciously aware of the scene that you're just setting. And you're actually describing a picture. You're talking about someone's life journey, which is very, very unique in terms of travel experience. So, do you do that with that camera in mind?
Well, Mark, I did travel quite a bit without the camera, and that was a mistake. When deciding to start shooting, I had to make the decision of like, I had to put my expensive camera away. It's just too high risk bringing it traveling, not just for theft, but for damage. So I downgraded, and downgrading was probably the best thing I ever did in terms of filmmaker. Because you have this camera that, you know, not all is lost if you lose it, not all is lost if it's broken, and it gave me a freedom to record everything, like you said. Um, so yeah, once I kind of downgraded, got myself a handy cam, and I could just record everything wherever I went. It kind of changed the traveling experience and the filming experience.
Let's dive into this cool project you're doing because I know the audience is really excited to hear about this. What is the project and how did it come about?
Yeah, so the project is called Are You Happy? And essentially what it is I travel around the world and ask everyone I meet one question: Are you happy? And it doesn't really matter whether or not the answer is yes or no. Either way, the answers have sent me on the adventure of a lifetime. Really, I've been invited into people's homes. I've missed trains, missed planes. Um, so that's essentially the show, and it's covered through a documentary series where each episode is a look into the life of a person that I interview. So while I'm walking on the street, I walk up to a stranger, ask him if he's happy. He says yes or no. All of a sudden, I'm in his home, and I'm having dinner with his family, or or showing me around town. So the show is really about these beautiful human interest stories.
Why that question?
So it originally started from a couple of documentaries that had been made in the 60s and the 80s that, for some reason or another, centered around this question of asking strangers, "Are you happy?" So that's where the inspiration came from. But the reason why I actually like went through with it and am still going for it is it ended. I didn't expect this to happen, but it ended up serving as a window to the soul, really.
Mm.
You could cut through so much fluff um, through that question. Once you ask that question, within an instant, it pulls the person I'm interviewing into this mode where they're immediately looking back on their entire life experience and giving you basically the thesis of their life, based on their life experience, yes or no. And you see that happening in real time through my documentary. Like, you can choose any video, it's all the same. The look in their eyes, whether it's yes or no, it's all the same. They kind of like, you see their life flash before their eyes.
That's very cool. When did you start this project?
I started the project in February of 2019, so a little over a year ago.
Okay, and who was the first person you asked if they were happy?
Yeah, the first person I interviewed was a major farmer in the United States, Joe Del Bosque. He's in California. Really great, brilliant man.
Why him?
I wanted to interview people of all walks of life, all on across all like across the entire spectrum of our society in terms of socioeconomic class. I was looking for a farmer. I ended up finding a major exporter of goods through a farm, which was a blessing in disguise. So I was originally looking for a field worker, but I ended up finding him.
So what did he say when you asked him? And I don't mean whether or not he was happy, but how did he kind of take it on board that you were doing this and thinking about this question of are you happy? Was he surprised that somebody was coming up to him to ask this question?
I think honestly, so many people are surprised with the question mark. It's like people don't really know what to do with it. When I reached out to them, they didn't know if I was some kid making a prank. They didn't know if I was like an actual serious journalist wanting to interview them, and if I was, why? What's the point?
Mm,
Um, and they originally said no to me. They gave me like a soft no, and soft no's are my favorite because it's basically a yes for me.
yeah.
So I drove the 4 hours from my house to their farm just to show up and just introduce myself in person. Just they because it was less about this documentary series, and what I want to ask was more about me, like who is this guy through the email. So I was like, let me just show up, and I took my camera. I walked into that office, and I was like, hey, my name's Atdhe. I sent you an email. Boom, 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 and then right there and then he's like, you know what? Let's get in my car. I'll show you around.
Wow.
And that was the interview.
Yeah, cool. That's very, very cool. So, how do you plan about, first of all, we're in difficult times now, obviously, with COVID-19, but prior to that, how did you plan where you were going to go to next?
I planned, in terms of long term, it was only a country ahead. And then in terms of short term, it was a state ahead. So throughout the day, I'd plan where I would, what state I tried to get to in that day if I was traveling through the United States. And then in the long term, it was okay, in 3 weeks, we're going to India. And then when we were in India, it was that same game of the day to day. Okay, what region of India, what city in India?
Hmm. So, how are you funding this project?
So when I first started, I was working full time remotely in the film industry. And then as COVID hit, I've kind of been just editing all of the footage that I captured. So that's really what it was. I mean, I was working while I was traveling.
Okay, right. And can people contribute to helping you out? Is there a
Yes,
crowdfunding process behind this as well?
yes, that's exactly right. So right now, because uh, because of COVID, because it's more difficult to fund the show is officially funded by donations only. So thank God we have a quite a large following of people that are dedicated to the show, and they are really what keeps the show alive. They're our patrons. So for $3 a month, they are donating to the show, which is in effect keeping the show alive, funding production and post production costs. And then in return, they're also getting benefits from being a patron. They're getting uncut interviews, behind the scenes making of the project. They're getting live streams that I do where I talk about my experience traveling, how I travel on a budget. All these talks that I do, podcasts that I do, it's specifically for these $3 patrons. And at the end of the day, I tell my audience, if you like what I'm saying and you would buy me a coffee, then you would become a patron.
Yeah, that's a cool
Three
way of
dollars.
that's a cool way of doing it. So for everybody listening today and watching this video, I am of course going to put all the details in the show notes so that you can support this man on his amazing journey to capture the stories behind people around the world who are happy. Now, not everyone's happy, so what are some of the responses been when people have said they're not happy?
Yeah, definitely financial situation is a big one. What I noticed between the happiest people in the world, like the common threads, were family, people having a support system around them, a job, having some, basically a cause they could go to that's bigger than them, whether it be plumbing or whether it be, a higher end job. And then passion, having that thing that they do after work when the kids are asleep that just gets them going. And then the unhappy people it's basically the inverse of that. They lack those things. That's why I always try to promote, like, support system, because the unhappiest people that I met had no, didn't have family in their lives, or they didn't value family enough, and they were out of a job, or they were struggling to find their passion. And all those things, by the way, those three things are things I talk about how to achieve, how to gain with my patrons.
Yeah, okay, great. So, geographically, out of the places that you've been to so far, where would you say are the happiest people?
I would have to say Kosovo.
Mm,
I traveled to Kosovo. I was working there for a little bit, and then I ended up loving it so much that I lived there. But the biggest learning I've had from this is that the happiest people haven't always had the happiest lives. And Kosovo is a young country full of beautiful, kind people, very welcoming to foreigners and tourists. And you go there and you think, wow, it's like heaven. Everybody's so nice here and so great and so smart. But then when you look into what they've experienced as a country, just 20 years ago they had this genocide, and I think about that contrast of the happiest people have had the unhappiest lives, but they've accepted suffering as a part of life and moved on. I feel that when you contrast what Kosovo has gone through as a country and how amazing the people are today, to me, it makes it the happiest place in the world, and it's the place I love going to, and I love being there.
Have you been to Bhutan yet?
Bhutan, no, I haven't.
It's got a official label around the world as the happiest country in the world, with
Ooh,
with
okay.
with the happiest people. So I would love to hear from you after you've been there to find out whether or not that is a valid statement or just a propaganda through marketing. So, in terms of the percentages of people that are happy versus not happy, have you kind of ranked that out yet? Have you? Can you tell us how are more people happy than unhappy?
Yeah, I'd say it's about 75% happy, 25% unhappy.
Mm.
Look, at the end of the day, it's so easy to, if you're watching the media or whatever is going on between your four walls, typically it is divisive, negative things. Because what I've learned in the journalism world is if it bleeds, it leads. So what you see between these four walls is typically something to provoke fear, anxiety, divisiveness, and it's easy to think that the world is an unhappy place. But the reality is that most people on any given day are just okay or happy. Um, and not too many people are unhappy, because if you think about it, people don't want to be unhappy. Typically, people are striving for happiness. So yeah, that's what I've learned. Most people are happy.
That's a great message because I think even in today's global environment where we've got this raging pandemic, and we've seen how the mainstream media has dealt with it, and people have become, I guess, insulated against that in the respect that people recognize that they can go outside their front door and they can still have a good day and they can still live their life to a certain extent. And let's face it, a lot of people during this times have changed their lives around for the better because of what's happening around the world. There's more family time going on, there's more connection to people maybe and talking. You and I are having a chat from different sides of the world about your happy project. There's a lot of positivity through this at the moment. Are you agreeing with that?
Oh, Mark, 100%. If the attempt with this pandemic was to scare us, was to put us in a place of fear, well, they had an inverse reaction, something they didn't expect, which family bonds grew stronger. We're no longer in their schools, we're in the home school. Mothers are teaching their children. It's beautiful, it's amazing. People are building gardens, making farms, going out for runs, getting in shape. It really is, kind of like a return to form for humanity itself. We kind of lost our way and relied too much on society's infrastructures, to the point that we were nothing without them. We were nothing without the education system. We were nothing without the 9 to 5 office job. But it took something like this to kind of shake us, return us back to form, and make us realize, well, we could live off the land. We don't have to go buy all of our groceries from the grocery store. We don't have to rely on multi-billion-dollar industries for food, clothing, shelter. A lot of things can be done with just the family.
I told a friend last night that during this COVID-19 lockdown process, the planet's lost 10 million pounds of body fat because of people getting out and exercising that probably didn't exercise very much before. Yeah, so that can't be a bad thing at all. Now, very noble for you to get out there around the world to ask other people if they're happy, but are you happy?
You know, um, it's funny because I also asked the question twice, because you asked me at the beginning. That's what I always do. I always ask it at the beginning, and then I ask them when they're least expecting it, just to make sure I got the true answer. And the true answer for me is, I'm just okay. Uh, all of the things in my life that I said are the source of happiness, family, work, passion. Luckily for me, those things, they're okay. And I'll take that. I will take just okay. Because at least for now, the things that truly matter, are the test results back? Is the laundry done? What's for dinner? Am I going to hear my brother's voice again? All these things that really make me happy. Those things they're not good, or they're not, super great, but they're just okay, and I'll take it. Um, and yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
That's
Now,
interesting because have you come across a kind of a definition system when you're asking these people this question? Because you've just stated something like someone can be okay, and okay can mean lots of different things, right? So when someone says they're happy, have you defined through the question and the answers you've received the level of happiness that someone is? So some people can say they're happy, but you can look into their eyes and think,
mm,
am I getting the real answer here? Is this true?
yeah, absolutely. What's interesting about involving the camera in the whole interaction is that as soon as the camera's there, it's no longer about my interpretation of the situation. All I'm doing is asking the questions and being silent. And when it ends up getting uploaded, um, we have like a army of millions of people that are now analyzing the body language and looking at the eye movement when they answer the question, saying, "Oh, that person's not actually happy because they shifted their shoulders, or they said yes but they meant no." So a lot of that analyzing it happens in the comments thread. It's really cool to see.
I've been focusing on that during this COVID time myself in terms of making sure that everything I do is in a more authentic and raw way because I think that creates a better connection between people. The fact that you're putting yourself out there and say, hey, I'm a guy, I've got a camera, I'm going to ask you this very, let's face it, what can get very personal question if you're expecting people. And I want to refer to a video I watched of yours with Moon Man, and you'll remember the guy on the
Yep.
street outside your house. That made me feel uncomfortable, that video. And the reason
Mm,
it made me feel uncomfortable was because I felt his pain. I felt
mm.
what he was going through. How did you react to that experience afterwards when the camera was off?
Yeah, so luckily the YouTube channel has the raw, uncut interviews. No glitz, no glamour, no music, no editing. It's just raw. So you see yourself. I turn the camera on myself when I see this guy who's struggling to stand up. I turn it on myself and say, I'm nervous. I'm scared to talk to this guy because it doesn't something feels off. But just like with everything in this documentary, the whole essence of the documentary is to jump into the deep end and try to get as close to truth and real life as possible. And there it was, literally on my front doorstep, and I wasn't going to pass it up. And all I really am is just an eye. It's just I just record and upload, and the rest is up to the world, really. So when I was interviewing this guy, at first I wanted to make sure he was okay. As you'll see in the YouTube video, my first question is, "Are you okay?" He says, "Yeah, I'm fine, just tying my shoe." Come to find out, he said he wasn't happy due to financial situations, and he didn't tell me this, but he looked to be struggling to stand up. So make of that what you will. You could see the video to see exactly what's going on, but it was a very raw, visceral video. It's still tough for me to even talk about. I struggled even to upload that. I wasn't even in the beginning. I wasn't even comfortable uploading it.
I was going to ask you that. Has there been a situation or situations where you haven't uploaded someone's response?
Yeah, they get too personal, and even if the person's like, "Oh, I'm okay with that on," I don't feel okay with it on. And then other times they will open up too much, and then they'll kind of close down, realize they're on camera, and be like, "Actually, can you not use that?" And then there are stories that people are really invested in, like the Sunrise Girl. I'm not sure if you've heard about her, but she was a girl I met that ran away. And every day, thousands of people ask me, "Where's the Sunrise Girl? What's happened to the Sunrise Girl?" And she's just, she's a friend of mine. And, I pray for her, but right now, more attention and more fame isn't, really what she needs.
Do you find that it's a therapeutic process for a lot of people too, for them to reflect on their life, how it is right now?
Yeah, it's like an unexpected therapy session.
Mm. Mm.
immediately they're thrusted into the room. They're laying on the couch and they're talking about their life experience, and it's beautiful. And to be honest, when I was in journalism school, um, I learned a trick that now I see a lot of journalists do that I never noticed before, which is silence. They will ask a question, and if they want more, they just won't say anything when the person is done answering. And they'll just sit in awkward silence. And naturally, as humans, we want to fill in that awkwardness. So the people will just talk and talk and talk. And I've used that technique, and that simple technique has changed the whole show. And people do end up using it as a way to just get things off their chest.
Has it been a therapeutic process for you?
That's a great question. I think about that all the time because um, everybody wants to ask the "Are you happy?" guy if he's happy. So imagine, waking up to your inbox every day and seeing thousands of people ask you, "Are you happy? Are you happy?" And at first it was a joke. It's like, oh, it's funny that all these people want to know if I'm happy. And now it's gotten to a point where it's like I can't turn around without me questioning myself. Like, am I happy? And what does happiness mean? And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know the secret to happiness. I have interviewed hundreds of people. Um, so I'm close at like figuring out what the commonalities are. But yeah, it's absolutely been an introspective experience for me as well.
How old is the oldest person you've interviewed so far?
Oof, I don't, probably shouldn't guess her age. Um, I would say late 70s to early 80s, probably.
Okay, and the youngest?
Three, 3 year
3 year old.
old. Yeah.
And what did the 3 year old say?
Of course, she was happy. She was very happy. I had to break it down to her in list of emotions. I had to say, "Are you happy, sad, angry?" And then, then from there, she chose happy, of course.
And what about gender difference between men and women? Are more men happy than women, or women happier than men? What's the general consensus there?
It's a good question. In terms of like gender findings, I'm not sure what the level of happiness is between genders, but I have noticed that um, men seem to be more open to talking than women.
Mm.
Uh, in my experience, and walking up to women, it's fair. You have a stranger with a camera, and you're typically walking up to people on the street, so they might be a little hesitant to talk. Um, but it's usually the men that are willing to tell a story.
Yeah, right. So let's go back to when you talked at the beginning of the show about your general travel experiences, and now you're going around the world with a camera in your hand. You're asking people if they're happy. You're not only seeing the world through different eyes, you're seeing humanity through different eyes. How's that changing the travel experience for you when you're focused on the documentary, asking people these questions?
Yeah, the dreaded airport. I hate being in there. I can't wait to get out. And, I've gotten to, at first, I had a disrespect and disdain for airport system and staff. And after doing it so much, I kind of just turn my brain off, show respect to everyone I meet, realize, it's just a job. And, um, they don't want to be there as much as I don't want to be there. I've also learned how to navigate through the scams and tricks that these airlines try to pull on us. So that's been very helpful in terms of learning, how to save a buck while traveling.
Do you want to share some of those with us? Because we've got a huge travel audience here, and I'm sure they'd be interested in any tips you can offer about, getting through that airport stuff.
Yeah, noise canceling headphones, preparing for that security check. But in terms of saving a buck, if you truly do have like a nice travel community watching this. They probably know about this already, but I use hidden city flying a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that don't know, it's basically the following. If you want to travel, say, from New York to London, very popular flight, very expensive flight, uh, what you could do with hidden city flying is take New York to random city, I don't know, in Ireland that connects in London, which ends up being cheaper, and you just leave at your connecting flight. Now, Airlines hate it. Airports hate it. It's not illegal. Skiplag.com is a website I use to book these hidden city flights. United Airlines tried to sue them, and Skiplag won. So it's not illegal, but if the airlines see you doing it often enough, they'll give you a stern talking to. But look, they've got more money than they know what to do with. So I think it's fine. The big caveat for my fellow travelers is that you can't check a bag. So as we know, while we're traveling, if we have our carry-on and the flight is full, they'll make you check it at the gate. So a way I've learned to get around that is to beg and plead and bribe and and try to keep. Of course, you get to these smaller airports. Bribery is a huge thing with traveling, with police and staff. Okay, we're talking about the truth of traveling here. If we're not talking about bribing while traveling to random countries, but anyway, so keep that carry-on bag on, but if they have to check the carry-on, then you're gonna have to go to baggage claim right after you get off that plane and do whatever you can to get that bag back.
Very cool. There's some cool travel tips there. I'll make sure that I add them in the show notes so that we can all become cheaper travelers. That's what it's all about, right? Now, you ask people if they're happy. What's the second question that you come up with to have that conversation?
Yeah, so after I ask people if they're happy, I also like to ask if they have a message for the entire world.
Mm.
Now that the show is getting millions of views, the world is really listening. So whoever I talk to on the street, if they have a message to the world, it's going to get out to them. And that's really where, if we weren't already going through a therapy session then, we get into some really good stuff with that question as well.
Want to share some of the things people have shared with you about, what's their message to the world?
Yeah.
What,
Oh, oh,
sorry,
oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I was asking you, yeah, what are some of the things that people have said in their message to the world?
That's a great. One fisherman told me, extend unconditional love when it's not asked for, and extend forgiveness when it's not deserved. Um, Somebody else told me there are a bunch of things we have to do in our life. We have no choice. We have to do them. Uh, we should choose to do them happy. It increases quality of life. Somebody I interviewed just today, just a few hours ago, told me, do what you love. Uh, Sounds a little generic, but she added, love it hard. I was like, wait, whoa, what do you mean by that? Love it hard. Love it with all you got. Love it with force. I really like that.
Mm. Yeah, I like that.
And then the Moon Man, the interview that you mentioned, when I asked him if he had a message for the entire world, he said he wanted his kids to know that he loved them, and that his kids were his world to him, I guess.
Was that a fairly generic one that a lot of people said about family members or their partner, or what was there a message there to go out to loved ones?
Um, Usually the world question was more in the context of generality. The Moon Man surprised me because he brought it very, very personal.
Yeah.
But the Are You Happy question a lot of times related back to loved ones, family, spouse, kids.
Hmm. Let's play a hypothetical game for a second. If you
Okay.
were to start this whole project again and you had to come up with another question that you would ask people, what would that question be?
Hmm. Give me a second to think about that because I really like that question. I have thought about it.
While you're thinking, I'll just give you mine, and mine would be, what do you
Yeah.
want to do before you die?
Hmm. I really like questions that kind of force people to look back and analyze. So, what are your regrets? What do you wish you could have done differently? Because you have a human interest answer there, and you have advice.
Yeah, yeah, true. Okay, so getting people to reflect back on their regrets in essence, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So tell us the longevity of this project. What's the end game with it all?
Yeah, great question. So right now, like if you imagine this project into three acts, well, right now we have a show, we want to make this into a feature-length documentary, and we already have the first two acts. First act is like the hero setting off on his journey, deciding to travel around the world, jump into the unknown. Second act is actually doing it, the fun and games, asking people if they're happy, going to strangers' homes, missing trains, having all this fun, getting sick, deli belly, whatever it is. Uh, Act three is what we still have to shoot and what the patronage is also going toward. In Act three, for the final part of the documentary, we're going to invite back every single person we interviewed, every single one, and we're all going to put them in a movie theater and we're going to watch the film together, the entire film, we're going to ask them again, are you happy? Have these things changed in your lives? What do you think about the film? What do you think about what your answer was then? Um, yeah, that's basically what the project is going to end up being. I haven't really
What
told anybody that, but yeah, that's what it's going
I've got a world exclusive right here then on what's
to
happening with the Are You Happy project. So that's a logistical challenge, bringing everyone together. How are you going to manage that one?
be. Luckily, what I've learned from creating stuff online, because I've worked in for movie studios in LA, and I've worked for TV. I've done things for the movie theater and for TV, but not really for online. And what I've learned from online is if you have a viral idea and if you have a product, you have a sale. So all of these people that I've interviewed have become characters, viral characters in and of themselves that have a big following. The Sunrise Girl had a worldwide hashtag that like went to Twitter and all over. The Moon Man, the Blonde Buddha, the Mountain, all these people that I've interviewed have gotten their own following. So my hope is making making a call to action with my audience to bring back their favorite characters, help raise money to bring all these people back. So yeah, that's a logistical plan.
Okay, cool. And what timeline is, and I know that's difficult with what's going on, but what kind of timeline do you have envisage in your mind about that?
Perhaps within a year to have that done.
Okay. And have you already got the next plan in process? What are you going to do after this?
I'd love to make this, to have like a feature-length film. Um, I'd love to make it into a series. More importantly, I've been working as a filmmaker my entire life to pay the bills. I worked as a commercial director. I've directed ads for like KFC and Tide, and a bunch of other different companies, which you can see on my website, which maybe you'll put in the show notes. So hopefully this launches a springboard. It serves as a springboard into my filmmaking career. I hope I finally get to execute on my narrative film ideas, TV ideas. Yeah.
What is one of the ideas that you have in terms of filmmaking? What's the vision? What have you got in your mind that you want to create and share with the world?
That's a great question. Um, and for that agent, that manager, that producer that you have listening right now, he could contact me through the show notes there, and I'd love to talk to him or her. But let's just say every generation of filmmakers has their own innovators, and my background is in studio filmmaking, and I had to leave that because I wanted to pursue these projects that no one else would help me pursue. And now we're at over 1 million followers. Um, get each video getting millions of views, getting a lot of attention. So you have a filmmaker who's breaking into the online platform with the studio background. So it's something that hasn't really been done before. So I'm looking to really innovate and make a change to this generation of filmmaking.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. We've come to the end of the show, but I wanted to give you 60 seconds to express to my audience about happiness and what you've learned about happiness on this amazing journey you're doing.
All right, so I kind of touched on it earlier. Um, actually, I was gonna say family, be fruitful and multiply. Have a family. That was a source of most people's joy. But since I already touched on that and I have about 30 seconds left, I want to talk a little bit about growing this online audience and exactly what it means to have 1 million followers. Algorithms don't matter, data doesn't matter, throw that all out the window. If you have a story you want to tell, all you need to start with is the passion. If you don't know what that thing is you want to tell, but you know you want to say something, you know you have something to say. If I were to tell you, give me a TED talk, give me a presentation on any topic at all, no preparation had, what would you give me? Whatever that thing is, that is probably what you should be making content about. And people will vibe with that wavelength of truth and passion you have with it, and your show, your content, your movie will grow.
Brilliant. That's a great note to end the show on. Atdhe Trepca, it's been fantastic having you on the Global Travel Channel today. And to all my listeners, I'm going to put all the details on how you can support this man on the show notes today. But more importantly, check out his website, his Instagram and YouTube, because there's some fascinating interviews that he's already done. The journey's only just begun, and he's going to bring this to an amazing conclusion with everybody. Atdhe, thanks very much for joining me on Global Travel Channel, and we're going to stay in touch because I want to see where this goes, and any way that I can help you out and my audience in the future, you just reach out and let us know.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you everybody for listening. It's been an honor. Thank you.